You want to know what real freedom feels like. It's not money, it's not time, it's not even success. It's when you stop living your life based on the opinions of people who aren't even living theirs. Most people are held hostage, not by chains or walls, but by the invisible grip of judgment. What will they think? What if I fail? What if they laugh, reject me, leave me? That fear runs the show for so many. It dictates their choices, their dreams, their identity, and they don't even realize it's happening. It's subtle, but it's deadly, because when you live to please everyone, you lose yourself, piece by piece. You weren't put on this earth to play small for the comfort of others. You weren't born to fit into their box, their timeline, their expectations. You've got a calling, and that calling is louder than their opinion, but only if you decide to listen. Because here's the truth, no matter what you do, someone will have something to say. You speak up, they'll say you're too much. You stay quiet, they'll say you're weak. You win, they'll say you're lucky. You fail, they'll say I told you so. So why live by their scoreboard? The minute you stop caring what they think is the minute you start reclaiming your energy. Your clarity, your momentum, you stop performing and you start creating. You stop hiding and you start building. Because when you break that addiction to approval, something shifts. You start showing up as you. Unapologetically, authentically, and that's when life begins to move. Not the version of you they want to see, but the real one, the powerful one, the one who's not here to be liked, but here to lead. You want to talk about freedom, real freedom, not the kind printed on posters or shouted in motivational quotes. I'm talking about the kind that lives in your nervous system, that pulses through your choices, that shows up in how you speak, how you walk, how you show up in your life. That kind of freedom doesn't come from money, followers, or even success. It comes the moment you finally stop needing their permission, when you rip the mask off, step out of the performance and say, this is who I am, take it or leave it. Most people are exhausted and they don't even know why. It's not just the job or the schedule. It's the constant, invisible weight of other people's expectations. Every decision is filtered through, what will they think? Every goal is secretly shaped by, will they approve? Every risk is stalled by, what if I fail and they see me? That mindset is a cage, and the worst part, you built it. Thought by thought, choice by choice. Every time you ignored your gut to keep the peace. Every time you dimmed your light so someone else wouldn't feel insecure. Every time you silenced your voice because you didn't want to rock the boat. Here's the raw truth. Living for the opinions of others is the fastest way to betray yourself. You start editing your personality. You water down your dreams. You pretend to be someone you're not just to fit a mold that wasn't designed for you in the first place. And all that pretending, it creates a deep, quiet kind of suffering. You look successful on the outside, but inside you're restless, numb, disconnected, because you're not living your life. You're managing a version of it that looks good to them, but what if you dropped the act? What if you stopped handing the steering wheel of your life to people who haven't even earned the right to ride in the car? What if you decided that your worth wasn't a group vote? That your truth doesn't require consensus? That your dreams don't need to be justified, explained, or approved? That's the power shift. That's where you start to come alive again. When you're no longer trying to impress, you get to express. When you stop obsessing over how you're perceived, you finally get to create, to build, to speak, to move. You take the energy you used to spend managing their opinion and invest it into mastering your craft, deepening your purpose, sharpening your focus. And people feel that because authenticity has a frequency. When you walk into a room fully aligned with who you are, you don't need to demand respect. It gets given, not because you're loud, not because you're arrogant, but because you're real. The truth is, people will talk no matter what. If you rise, they'll question your worth. If you fall, they'll celebrate it. If you stay the same, they'll criticize your lack of growth. So why live your life by a script they're constantly rewriting? Break the pattern, rewrite your own. Stop living for applause that disappears the second you stop performing. Stop chasing approval from people who don't even have clarity in their own lives. The crowd isn't your compass. Your soul is. It's not about being rebellious for the sake of rebellion. It's about being radically honest about who you are, what you value, and where you're going, and then having the courage to walk that path, even if no one claps. Especially if no one claps. That's where you find your strength, not in being liked, but in being aligned. That's where you become unstoppable, not because you have no fear, but because you've decided that being yourself is worth more than being accepted. Most people live their entire lives playing a role they never auditioned for. They act out a script written by culture, family, peers, trying to be what they think they're supposed to be. They dress a certain way, talk a certain way, choose careers and relationships based on what fits the image that earns them praise, recognition, and safety. And in the process, they bury their authentic self under layer after layer of performance. But here's the problem: when you spend your life trying to be what others want, you forget who you really are. And the more you perform, the more exhausted you become, because pretending is a full-time job with no real reward. You want power. You want clarity. You want peace. It starts the moment you stop caring about their reactions and start caring about your truth. Because the second you stop filtering your decisions through the lens of their opinions, you create space. Space to hear yourself again. Space to ask the questions that matter. What do I actually want? What do I believe? Who am I becoming? Most people never get to that level of honesty with themselves because the noise is too loud. They're too busy trying to fit in, to even consider whether they belong in that space in the first place. Let me tell you something. You don't find your voice by being silent. You don't find your truth by living in someone else's version of reality. You find it by stepping out of the noise, shutting out the critics, and daring to be real. Fully, unapologetically, relentlessly real. And that starts when you decide that your authenticity matters more than their approval. When you begin to live not for likes, not for applause, not for validation, but for alignment. And alignment is power, it's peace, it's freedom. It's the kind of confidence that doesn't shout. It just walks into a room and shifts the energy. Here's the paradox. The more you try to please everyone, the more invisible you become. Because when you're constantly adapting to match the expectations of others, you lose your edge. You lose your voice. You fade into the background of your own life. And deep down you know it. You feel it. That tension in your chest. That whisper that says, "This isn't me." That ache that grows every time you say yes when you meant no. Every time you smile when you're breaking inside. Every time you show up as a watered-down version of yourself just to keep the peace, but you don't have to live like that. The shift happens when you start choosing authenticity over approval. That means speaking up even if your voice shakes. That means saying no even when it disappoints people. That means walking away from places and people that don't make room for the real you. And yes, at first, it's uncomfortable. You might lose relationships. You might feel isolated. But what you gain is priceless: integrity, self-respect, energy that's no longer wasted on pretending, and a deeper connection to your own power than you've ever known. When you stop caring what they think, something inside you unlocks. You start to create from the core. You stop second, guessing every decision. You start acting faster, moving bolder, thinking clearer, because you're no longer stuck in the mental maze of approval. Seeking. That space that used to be filled with doubt, now it's filled with momentum. That energy that used to go into managing their perception, now it goes into building your vision, and people feel that. They're drawn to it, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. And real is magnetic. Living authentically doesn't mean you never get judged. It means you stop allowing that judgment to define you. It means you trust your gut even when the crowd disagrees. It means you hold your line even when it would be easier to bend. Because you've made a decision that who you are is non-negotiable. That your truth doesn't need permission to exist. That your worth isn't up for debate. Judgment is the tax you pay for growth. That's the deal. The moment you step out of line, the moment you say, "I want more, I want different, I refuse to settle. There will be voices. Voices telling you you're too much, too loud, too fast, too ambitious, not enough of this, too much of that. And the trap is thinking that those voices mean something, that they have weight, that their disapproval is evidence that you're wrong. But the truth is, those voices are confirmation. Confirmation that you're stepping out of their comfort zone, and maybe your own. The minute you stop following the herd, you become visible. The minute you speak a truth that makes others uncomfortable, you become a target. That's the nature of leadership, of ownership, of growth. Judgment isn't a sign that you should stop, it's a sign that you're finally moving. Most people aren't judged because they're not doing anything bold enough to trigger it. They've flattened themselves so much, adapted so carefully, that they've become invisible, safe, acceptable, and unfulfilled. You've got to understand something. Judgment is projection. What people say about you is a mirror of their own fears, their own insecurities, their own limitations. You grow, they see what they're not doing. You speak, they feel exposed. You succeed, they feel threatened, and so they judge, not because of who you are, but because of what your evolution represents to them. So let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them label. You weren't born to fit their narrative. You're here to write your own. And if you think you can wait until you're confident, until you're perfect, until everyone claps, forget it. That day won't come. You want to break through. You have to learn how to act in the presence of judgment. You have to build the muscle of showing up even when they're whispering, even when they're criticizing, even when they're mocking from the sidelines. Because guess what? They're not in the game, they're in the stands, and no one in the stands gets to decide how far you go on the field. You don't grow by being liked. You grow by being real, by risking the loss of approval to step into your power, by saying, I'm not here to be comfortable. I'm here to change. Every person who's ever built something extraordinary has faced judgment, not because they were wrong, but because they were ahead, because they saw something no one else saw and had the courage to move before it made sense to others. And the ones who didn't quit, the ones who didn't let judgment define them, they're the ones who led, who inspired, who transformed. The reason most people don't change isn't because they can't, it's because they're too afraid of being judged. They'd rather stay stuck and accepted than grow and be questioned, but you're not most people. You're not here to tiptoe through life hoping not to offend anyone. You're here to rise, to evolve, to lead. And that means you're going to ruffle some feathers. That means you're going to trigger some people who haven't done the work you've done. And that's okay. You're not here to carry their comfort. You're here to carry your mission. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you grow. Every time you speak, even though your voice shakes, you get stronger. Every time you show up in your power while they throw shade, you build resilience. That's how you become unshakable, not by avoiding judgment, but by learning to move through it with clarity, with fire, with purpose. So when they judge, don't shrink, expand, don't explain, elevate, don't prove, just keep building. Let your actions speak. Let your consistency silence the noise. Let your results do the talking, because nothing quiets a critic like undeniable progress. And nothing protects your peace like knowing you're living in integrity, aligned with your values, your vision, and your purpose. Most people wait. They wait for permission. They wait for clarity. They wait for the perfect moment. But what they're really doing is outsourcing their power. They tell themselves it's patience or wisdom, but deep down, it's fear. Fear of taking responsibility for their own transformation. Because the moment you fully take control of your life, the moment you say, I'm done waiting, everything changes. You stop being a spectator and become the author. You stop playing defense and go on the offense. You stop asking for direction and start forging the path yourself. You've got to understand. Freedom doesn't come from comfort. It comes from ownership, from saying no more excuses, no more pointing fingers, no more blaming them, that or then. The moment you accept total responsibility for your life, your mindset, your habits, your results, That's the moment everything opens up. It's not about guilt. It's not about shame. It's about realizing that if you created it, you can change it. If you allowed it, you can shift it. If it's your pattern, you can break it. That's the kind of power most people avoid because it strips away the option of playing small. But it's also the kind of power that sets you free when you take responsibility. You stop living at the mercy of circumstances. You stop being the victim of your environment. You realize that no matter what happens out there, you still get to choose your response. You get to choose how you interpret it, how you learn from it, how you grow through it. You start recognizing patterns in your life, not as proof that you're broken, but as signals that something deeper needs attention. And that attention, that awareness, is the beginning of breakthrough. It's the start of real change, not surface-level, temporary change, but deep, lasting, internal change. You can't change what you don't claim. As long as you're blaming other people for where you are, you give them control over your future. As long as you're waiting for someone to come save you, you'll stay stuck. But the moment you stop waiting and start building, your entire energy shifts. You go from powerless to powerful. You go from uncertain to unstoppable. You go from surviving to leading, and that shift doesn't require external permission. It just requires a decision. Your decision to lead your own life instead of being led by fear, by doubt, by the noise. And make no mistake, owning your life isn't easy. It means being brutally honest with yourself. It means asking the hard questions. Why do I keep repeating the same cycles? Why do I tolerate what drains me? Why do I sabotage what I say I want? It means looking at your own patterns, your own beliefs, your own behaviors. Not to beat yourself up, but to wake yourself up. Because once you're awake, you can shift, you can rewrite, you can rewire. You stop negotiating with old stories and start creating a new one. A story that aligns with who you're becoming, not who you've been. This kind of ownership demands courage. It demands discipline. It demands that you show up when it's hard, when it's messy, when no one's clapping for you yet. It demands that you keep your word to yourself, that you do the work even when it's not convenient, that you become the kind of person who doesn't just react to life, but creates it. Because that's what leaders do. They don't need everything to be perfect to move forward. They just need a reason, a mission, a fire inside that says, I will not waste another year, another month, another moment waiting for something or someone to give me what I already have the power to claim. When you take responsibility, you stop negotiating with your potential. You stop watering down your dreams to make other people comfortable. You start making decisions based on who you want to become, not who you're afraid to leave behind. And yes, it gets uncomfortable. Yes, you'll have to disappoint some people, but you'll sleep better, you'll breathe deeper. Because nothing is heavier than living a life that doesn't belong to you. There's a moment, one defining moment, when you realize that everything you've been doing, everything you've been chasing, was based on someone else's vision of success. You wake up and ask yourself, whose life am I really living? And it hits you, not the life you chose, but the life you accepted. You've been playing roles, ticking boxes, meeting expectations that were never yours to begin with. And that realization, that's the spark. That's the moment the old identity starts to crack. And what comes through the cracks is your true, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. When you stop trying to prove something to the world, you finally get the space to hear your own voice. And that voice is not always loud. It starts as a whisper saying, there's more in you. You're not done yet. This isn't all there is. And if you're brave enough to stop and listen, if you're willing to sit in the discomfort of truth, you start seeing how many of your choices were made from fear, not from faith, from lack, not from vision, from trying to avoid rejection, not from a place of self-respect. People spend years, decades even, trying to fit in with people they don't even like, impressing crowds that forget their name tomorrow, all while abandoning their own potential in the process. But when you stop caring what they think, when you finally take your power back, you begin to move differently, you speak differently, you walk into rooms not looking for approval but radiating certainty. You stop hustling for worthiness and begin building from worth, and let me tell you, there is a power in that shift that can't be touched, because it's not about ego, it's about alignment. You stop being a slave to trends. You stop needing the applause. You stop shrinking to fit. You no longer say yes to things that drain you just so you can seem agreeable. You no longer dim your brilliance because someone else might feel uncomfortable in your light. You begin choosing your peace over their opinions, your joy over their judgment, your truth over their expectations. And that's when you become truly dangerous, not to others, but to every limitation that ever tried to cage you. The moment you step into that kind of clarity, you start attracting a different reality. You call in relationships that match your growth, opportunities that reflect your courage, results that mirror your discipline. Because you're no longer trying to manipulate perception, you're living from authenticity, and authenticity has a magnetic force. It doesn't need to shout, it doesn't need to sell, it just is, and people feel that. They trust it, they respond to it, because real recognizes real. This is where freedom starts, not in the absence of obstacles, but in the presence of truth, not in controlling everything around you, but in mastering what's within you. And that mastery doesn't come from comfort, it comes from confrontation. You've got to confront the parts of yourself that are still performing, the parts that still feel like they need to be liked, to be validated, to be accepted. You've got to look them in the eye and say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I don't need that anymore. I've got this now." Because you do, you've got this. You've got the ability to rewrite the story, to shift the narrative, to redefine what success, power, love, and happiness mean on your own terms. And when you do that, you give others permission to do the same. Not because you told them to, but because they saw you do it first. They saw you let go of the mask. They saw you walk away from what was easy and familiar in order to rise into what was honest and real. And that kind of courage is contagious. The truth is, people will always have opinions. They will always have something to say, but none of it holds weight unless you give it power. And when you reclaim that power, everything changes. You start trusting yourself more. You stop apologizing for evolving. You stop seeking approval for your dreams. You stop holding back. You get to wake up every day knowing that your life, your choices, your direction, it's all yours. You're not trying to meet someone else's standard anymore. You're raising your own. You're not waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And when you live like that, there's nothing, absolutely nothing, you can't become.